So until now, we've talked about working with sessions, and I showed an example how I can actually use this within an in-memory store, more or less. But what I would want to show you now, like I promised, would be how to work with these sessions, but in combination with cookies as well as a data store. And for a data store, we will use SQLite. We'll make it as simple as possible. But just so you know, this is extensible to any data store. You could use a Postgres, you could use a key value store like MongoDB or whatever. But I will show you this example with SQLite, because again, it allows me to actually store my file locally, my DB file, and then read it, and then of course consume the data inside of it. And so without further ado, what I would want to do more or less is to go ahead and set up this store. So if you see here, normally we're setting up our store like this. So we use this cookie store, and then we put in a session, and then that's it. But what we want to do now, of course, we would want to open a database connection to an SQLite database. So I can simply say gom.open, and within open, I would like to pass SQLite.open. And within the SQLite, I would like to pass the name of the database. I can call this session.db. So this will be the name of our database. And aside of this, we need to pass some further gom config. But for now, I will leave it as this. We can provide more information afterwards. So let's install this. So go mod tidy. This should be able to install our driver, SQLite driver for us. So pretty straightforward. And now we need to handle our error. So I would have here, so I get back DB and error, right? And at this point, what I would want to do, of course, is to handle the error. So I can simply say for now, say if error is not nil, I'm just gonna panic actually. And here I would say we failed to connect to database. Failed to connect to database, as straightforward as this. And what I've also done is to go ahead and create a file called session.go inside our modules. So this is where I would like to create a struct that will be mapped to a table in our SQLite database to represent our session. And it's going to be really pretty straightforward. So here I say type session. It's going to be a struct. So I'm just going to use gom model. So it's going to pre-populate the basic things for us, like ID, created that, updated that, stuff like that. I will only need to modify the ID here because I want my ID to be a string. Otherwise, it's going to be an int64. So here I provide some info for gom, and I would like to say that this should be unique. And the next thing I would want to provide, maybe, of course, is the actual data we want to store, and we'll store this as bytes. This is going to be a slice of bytes. And I provide another thing here, and I call it expiry. So this is more or less when my data will expire. I'll store this as a Unix timestamp. That's really what I would want to do. And I would like to add some few functions actually. So these functions more or less we would use to set our session, or okay, let's keep it simple. So I'm just going to work with this like this. So we come back here. So we now have our ADB instance for hover is a pointer to our gomdb. So now what we would want to do, it's our database more or less is we would need to, I'd like to do an auto migrate for our database struct, of course the one we just created. So it wants at models.session. So over here. So this will automatically make migrations for us should we make any changes to our struct, more or less our table. And what I would want to do is, I think this should be enough. So I don't need to, maybe I can do some error handling. So I can say if error, when we migrate, if this error is not equal to nil, what can we do? For now, let's panic, and we say something like unable to make migrations to sessions table, something like this. I think this is already fine. It's fine. So then when we have our session set up like this, the next thing, of course, I would want us to do would be to hook this up with our session, just so that of course we don't have it like we had it before, our store I mean, but now we would want to point what we have to our session. And initially, if you see, we of course there's a couple of ways you would do it, but I would like to do it in such a way that we have a lot of flexibility as possible to of course manipulate the data whichever we want. And so to do that, I'm probably just gonna get rid of all of these for now. So at this point we create our table, we open connection to our table, and then we auto migrate. So if this is not there in the first place, it will create it for us. That'll be more or less the first thing we would want to do, so that if I say something like go start the server, go run main.go, this should be able to of course create the database for us and the table as well. And give it a couple of seconds, and then if you look down here, I hope you can see it, you would see our session.db, which is of course the name we gave it over here, and that is totally fine. And because we don't have any panic of errors over here, we already know that our migration actually worked. So that's fine. So now what we can actually do, pretty straightforward, I don't want us to waste so much time, would be, let's say at login, so we are already for now we actually do not, our HTTP server is completely stateless. We don't know anything about what's happening with our users and everything. But what I can do actually is, so if I look at our user, let me see, 1 second. So for now we actually just we've fetched the user from the database, we verify the password, and if everything is okay, we add some GWT token and we return to the client. And that's totally fine. But what I would want us to do now is to of course make use of what we actually just created. And to do that, what I would want to do more or less would be to come down here after we have verified the user's password. Now I would like to create a session, and it's going to be of type models.session like this. And now I would like to add some information. So ID, I would like to use the user ID as the ID of the session, so I can always map this to a given user. And then I would like to maybe expiry, I would set this to time.now. And of course I need to convert this to a Unix timestamp, just so I can because of course the data type has to match, and of course we're using int64. But now I would of course want to set the expiry at 24 hours from now, so I can say 24 multiplied by time.hour like this, and then I convert this to Unix, and this should be fine. And of course the next thing I would want to add is the data. And now which data do I want to store? So I can actually store something like, let's say I say data, our data, of course this is an interface, but I get to decide more or less what the structure could look like, the interface could look like. But now I would want to store something that looks like a JSON, like with key value pairs. And I can store, I don't know, something like let's say I can say username. Of course you're free to do whatever you want to do at this point. And now I can maybe add the user.email, something like this. And I can also say user ID, and then I can say user ID, something like this. And then I have my data, but of course for now this is still a map of strings, and I need to convert this to bytes. So I can call it data bytes would now be so I think I can of course use the JSON library to mash out this. I can call json.mashout, and I provide my data. But of course this should return two things, so a byte slice and an error. And I can say data bytes error. And of course here I pass my data, I pass the data bytes, but of course I need to undo the error here, so I will say if this error is not equal to nil. If this error is not nil, what I can say, maybe I just do something like this, and here I say HTTP internal server error, something like this, I don't know, and then I return the error. But hopefully if everything goes fine, then at this point we have our session. So now what I would want to do more or less would be to we already have our GORM here, but of course this one is pointing to our Microsoft SQL database. So but what I would want to do here more or less would be to establish a different connection to our session database. And so so what we can quickly do, just so this session doesn't get as long, like really long, is maybe I can copy this part, bring that over here, and so when we have our session, I can put this one here, and I can call this just to differentiate it from what we had above, I can call this GOMDB like this. And now we have our DB, and now I can actually say gomdb.create, and with the create method I simply pass our session, and of course I can also handle the error. So I can say if error, so this create, of course should have an error path, so this one, and we say if this error is not equal to nil. We're actually spending most of our time handling errors, but that's also fine. I'm just gonna copy this and put it here. But at this point we know we are able to create our session, and now what we can actually do is to now persist this additional information in our token. And to actually do that, what we can do is over here in the login we have this persist cookie. I can actually modify this function so that apart from taking a cookie, it can also take what else are we supplying in the login. So we actually what is important for us more or less would be this session ID, if I can find where I put it. Where is it? So this session ID, this is quite important for us, but again this is of course also the ID of the user, but that's totally fine. So we can actually, let's keep it all separate. So here I can add a uuid.new string, and this will give us a new uuid string, and then I can actually copy this so that each time the user actually signs in, they get a new session ID. That's fine. And here, if you go to persist token, what I would want to do is maybe I can add here session ID, and then we have our token as well, and that would be a string. So again, we go to login, we pass our session.id, and then we have our string as well. But now what we can of course quickly do is we come down here, we set the cookie. I'm gonna call it session ID, and it will be our, and of course it should be session ID what we passed. What is session ID? Oh, of course, let's get to this. No, I can already put this in here, that's totally fine. And I can make this 86,400, and I can maybe make all of these empty strings false true, something like this. And maybe I actually make this, sorry, set it up like this. But other than that, here again I can do my set cookie. I can actually just copy this guy, bring it over here. So we have our session ID, and this should be our session ID. And what else? We can actually, let's even make this shorter. So we can make this as this should be 6 minutes. And then our domain would be, our path will be this. For domain, I'm actually going to leave it empty, and then false and true, so it's to be an HTTP only cookie. And now everything should be fine, so that when we get at this point, we will create a new token. Again, in the future, we would really clean up this code to make it more look nicer, but that's fine for now. We are good with this. And so again, when you log in, we'll set this cookie. So just to test that everything works, at logout, I will also want to show this cookie. So I'm probably just going to copy this part and go to logout, and here maybe I'll now remove this one. I don't need this one actually. I need the new one that I created. So actually now we don't need to create any any sessions anymore. So what we now do, for example, would be we can get our session ID, and we can get this from of course there should also be an error, but we can get this from our cookies. So when the user gets to this endpoint, we get the cookie. But for now, this is for demo purposes. We're actually not using it to do anything important. So it's called session ID. So, and we again handle our error up here. So if this error is not nil, please give us a message and say something like cookie missing in request, something pretty straightforward like this. And now what I would want to do is I can come here, have my session. So this would be of type model the session. And now I have my DB open. Now I can say gom DB. So actually this is the only thing here, so I can call it DB. We don't have a conflict like in the other page. So but now I can say db.where. I use the where clause and I provide some information. I say where ID is equal to, and of course I have to provide the ID. So the ID I'm passing here would be session ID, and of course I need to simply just get the first attribute and then I map it to my session like this. And what else can I do? So now I can maybe unmarshal this. I have data. Again, I had a map of string of strings, so I can put that here. And now I can simply unmarshal the session, the data, yes. And I would want to provide data, of course, and map this to this. And now what I can actually do is I don't need to do all of this anymore. So I can simply say session, and I can actually pass the session like this. So the only point is that when you log out, we will retrieve the session and we just give it back to the user. But the cool thing is, of course, you don't have to provide this. It will be automatically appended to our request. So what we'll do now would be to open our Insomnia one more time. We'll try to log in to see if this session ID is persisted, and then we'll also try to log out and see what happens. So let's move over to Insomnia right quickly. So we are back again to Insomnia, and I've taken the liberty to just create a new folder called session, and then just add it to endpoints, log in and log out. But again, if you simply just go to our cookies, you will see if I go to manage cookies, we got out these ones initially when you log in. So we were adding like this access token, and then of course if you remember the cookie expiration time. And but what we would want to do now, of course, like I told you, would be actually test out the logic we had. So of course, if you log in, we should be able to see the session ID, of course, in the cookie over here. So, and at the same time, you can simply just try to log in. And again, as usual, if I come back to cookie, as you can see here, we have an access token, we have code expiration time, and now we have a session ID. And this is just from logging in. Of course, if I try to manage this, you should also see that this is, of course, of type domain is localhost, and it's still of HTTP only cookie. And but now if we go to log out and send the requests, and now we go to preview, now you see we get our session back. So when it was created, when it was updated, deleted is not, and then the ID again, of course, the session ID that was persisted, and the actual data. And if you could have already imagined, the data is actually a stream of bytes. And if we look at this in an SQLite Explorer, you will also see that this is actually stored as a blob. And if you download the blob and peer into the content, you will still see what we stored inside. And I can also quickly show you that if you don't mind, but over here you can already see that this works. And now we can actually get creative. Of course, maybe I'll leave this to you, but I can also see how much further I can explore on this, just so you can see how much this can be utilized to build a really secure and fast application that's devoid of lots of redundant queries and calls to the backend. Anyways, that will be all for now. I would show you this from the SQLite Explorer, and then we can actually conclude this session. So now we are on the web browser. I've actually there is this online tool called SQLite Viewer. So basically, you can actually use it to look at files that happen to be SQLite files, and you can easily explore the content. And what I would try to do now is more or less to import our session DB file. So I import this, and if you look at this, this is actually the content. This is what we're querying. So we have the ID and these other properties. But then if you look at data, it's actually of type blob. If I hover over this, you will it says actually blob. I'm not pretty sure if you can see it, but I can download this and then I can show you what it looks like. So we are back on the browser, and this is what the file actually looks like. So maybe I'll make this, expand this a little bit more. But if I hover over this, you can actually see it says blob. And then if I try to download it, of course, you can see the file over here get downloaded. And then when I open it, if you look into the content, this was actually what we stored. This more or less a hash map or a JSON payload or dictionary, depending on the language you are most comfortable with. But the point is actually that this is stored as a blob, as a file actually, and that's actually the cool thing about this. And so, but you actually get the point. So this is actually one way we can work with sessions with Go. So now you can see we combined a lot of things to actually get this work. So we used cookies, and of course we added we also added, of course, worked with SQLite database. And that will be that for this session. I really hope you've learned a lot. Again, as a recap, in this chapter, we have gone through how you can actually work with sessions, and not just sessions. We also try to look at to understand more or less what tokens are, and actually how we can utilize them for our application. So we worked with we saw again how you can also use not just JSON data but also form data, which is also like really pretty simple and straightforward. So we looked at session management, and now we looked at cookies and all that. And I really hope that you've gotten something in this session. And again, of course, if anything is not clear, feel free to leave me a question. I will get back to you as quickly as possible. Play the video at your own pace, and yeah, and have fun actually doing it. And that's really all I can say. And again, yeah, if you are new to our channel, to support us, all you have to do actually is to just subscribe and then engage really with me, ask questions, give your opinions. I really want to hear it. Things like that actually really encourage me to go out there, and try to bring to you and break these things down to you as easy as possible. And because again, the goal actually is to really really give you something that you can use in your place of work, and not just for the sake of making tutorials. Anyways, that will be all for this session. Thank you for being part of this journey, and of course stay tuned. We have a couple more chapters to go, and stay safe and stay learning. And until next time, have a lovely evening, and bye bye.